Welcome to Elemental Energy, the podcast where we discuss how to simplify decarbonization. Here, we will introduce emerging low-carbon energy technologies and give you insight on how to navigate and support the evolving energy landscape. It is our goal to develop content to give you confidence to help transition the market and make low-carbon energy reliable and affordable. I'm your host, Marcia Leonard. Everyone, welcome to Elemental Energy. If you have listened to us before, excellent. Welcome back. If you are new to this podcast, we're so happy to have you here. I am a super nerd at heart. I have a degree in molecular biology, and I truly believe that biotech has a huge part to play in the energy transition space, as well as the decarbonization space. So I've been following it for a while now, and I'm not the only one who believes that biotech is going to play a huge role in it. There are others out there. So I am joined today by the CEO of Cemvita Gold H2. We're going to be discussing biotechnology at a high level, as well as how it's playing a huge role in the production of hydrogen. So without further ado, Charles Nelson, welcome to Elemental Energy. Please go ahead and introduce yourself further.
Hey, thank you very much for having me on, and excited to be here. So again, I'm Charles Nelson, call me Charlie. And so I serve as the CEO of Gold Hydrogen, which is a spin-out company of Cemvita, and also serve as the Chief Operating Officer of Cemvita. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Hey, we are so happy to have you here. Like I said, biotech it's something not a lot of people are talking about in this space, and I really think that it does need to be recognized. Give us a little bit more of your background and history too, because when I look back at your history, you have an entrepreneurial spirit too. Everything you touches turns to gold, which is kind of funny because your Gold H2 title that you're currently at. I just really enjoy seeing your journey, and I think that you need to bring it out a little bit more to talk about how you are really supporting these companies and growth.
Sure, definitely. So as far as a background goes, and by the way, very much appreciate that sentiment. But as far as my background goes, I'm a chemical engineer by training. And, I really had an interesting path from my time in my early career where I quickly got into oil and gas infrastructure development, actually developing projects from concept to, flowing gas through a pipe or oil through a terminal. And so had a background of really developing physical assets and understanding all of the contracts, the engineering, what it needs to take to kind of get something from idea into a physical working hard asset. And translated that, the company I was at originally is called Marquest Energy Partners. That got sold to Marathon. And so I joined a group called Grey Rock Energy, which is a catalyst-based company. And, while I was there, served as their chief commercial officer and really started to get into the environmental conversion space. That led us to, well, it's kind of crazy. Right when I joined, oil went from $100 a barrel down to $25 a barrel. And so we had to reformulate everything and ended up adding in essentially flare gas as one business unit and CO2 processing as another. And those ended up being their own independent companies. So the CO2 one is called Infinium now. It's an electrofuels platform. And then we spun out a company called ClearShift. And, ClearShift built multiple assets, West Texas, North Dakota. And then, from there, met Moji and the crew over at Cemvita. And they had a particularly interesting angle on processing in general, using biology as essentially a processing tool in heavy industries, which I at the time had no background in, had very little knowledge of outside of hey, there's ethanol plants and, they ferment corn and sugar and whatnot. And so that really kind of opened my eyes to the prospect of using biology in heavy industries, which was the, kind of the thesis behind Cemvita as a whole. And so joined them as their chief business officer, then to become their chief operating officer at the company, and really taking a lot of the technologies that they had and then forming those into more companies, as they all have kind of different theses. One's in mining, one's in hydrogen, the one that I'm the CEO of now. And then we have a whole nother one that produces jet fuel and SAF to offset soybean farming, et cetera. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey, is just really taking the early career experience on building new things and translating that into energy technologies, which a lot of these new up and coming technologies are in their commercialization phase or pre-commercial phase. And so just kind of helping understand where it fits in the industry, what's the right application, which can really make or break how how successful a technology is in entering into the energy ecosystem.
So before we even get into gold hydrogen, I want to touch briefly on Cemvita's other technology in the mining space. Okay, so from my understanding, it's a biotech that they send into the earth that helps mine lithium.
And copper, yes.
And okay.
And easily, it's extensible to other metals as well. But I mean, in essence, and again, this isn't my primary responsibility, so I'll paraphrase
High
it.
level, high level.
Yeah, basically, in typical copper mining, for example, or lithium mining, things are extracted in copper. Let's just use copper as an example. So copper is extracted. So they basically dig it up, put it into these giant heaps. They're literally called heaps. And then essentially there's a sulfuric acid sprinkler system, for lack of a better term, and then that basically sprays on the rock, and that goes down and breaks down the bonds in between the rock and the metal itself. So that goes into solution, and then you go and process it and get your pure copper. About 20% of the world's copper that's mined today, is actually done using biology. And it does a similar thing. It breaks down that bond between the rock and the metal itself. And so what we've done is we've taken those microbes and essentially supercharged them with the intention of being able to access the $250 billion in mined but not extracted copper, because it's too low grade to economically extract, and using traditional methods. And so we're really trying to unlock brand new resources that are already, they've already been extracted, right? The damage is done, but it's not economical to extract them. So on the mining side, it's all about taking these various extremophiles that can do the same job as the sulfuric acid, but essentially it's replacing sulfuric acid entirely using microbes. So you don't end up with red mud, you don't end up with acid mine drainage, and you can economically extract a lot more of the resource that is mined. So you're not just going after high and mid-grade resource. You can also access low-grade resource. That's it in a nutshell. And again, extensible to other metals, pick a metal, nickel, cobalt, you name it. Same type of processes, it can be used in those as well.
So listeners, this interview gets way cooler when we talk about hydrogen too. That was just a brief excerpt of what biotechnology is playing in the mining and minerals space. Before we even dive into it, I always like to ask people who are on elemental energy a very polarizing question. And I would like to know your stance on climate change, because coming from an oil and gas background, I have one of those as well. I sit down at Thanksgiving dinner tables and I really have a hard time expressing sometimes my stance with my family. So I like to hear a bunch of different perspectives, and I like other people to hear them as well. What is your stance, Charlie?
Well, my stance is, it's kind of interesting because climate change, I mean, it happens. And, I think the big debate that people are missing in the whole climate change thing is is it man-made or is it not? Right. And so climate change in general, yes, the earth has historically heated up, cooled down. That's a function of just planetary physics. That just happens. Now, of course, you put a bunch of CO2, anyone who's done lab experiments, you put a bunch of CO2 in a bowl and apply heat to it, and it's going to trap heat. So, I mean, just from a, global scale of that's going to happen. So that's that's not really a debate. The thing about how to address it though is something that I also think that's kind of missing in this, because, it's irrelevant whether or not we're causing it, frankly. We still only live on Earth. We are a single planetary species. So whether or not we caused it, climate change is happening. Oceans are being measured warmer. So I just think that we as a society should have a little bit better control over some of these things than we do. So I mean, like, and we're already starting to do that. There's like basically carbon capture. Like DAC, for example, is like essentially the first step of terraforming. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my stance. It's like, yes, it can be measured. I think it's kind of a senseless debate as to whether we're causing it or not. And I think we need to get a handle on it, because it's really like there's a lot at stake in terms of like our critical infrastructure, cities that are built on coasts, like, the vast majority of the like society as we know it is built on coasts. So, that's kind of my stance. It's relatively pragmatic.
Looking for that oceanfront property in Arizona, it might come true.
I mean, hey, I mean, look at what's happened historically with the Earth. Like, the water levels go up, water levels go down. It's how we end up with rock stratification and things like that. So, like, it's happened before. So, I just think it's kind of a funny debate to begin with.
Well, thank you for sharing your perspective. I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. What is gold hydrogen?
All right. So, gold hydrogen, basically, we developed a microbe package that we can inject into depleted, abandoned, end of life, oil assets that still have a lot of oil left in them, right? Like, so those oil assets, when something's called depleted, they're still anywhere between like 30 on the low side and like 80% on the high side of the remaining oil in place. And that's a lot of resource to leave down there. And, and so what we could do is we inject these microbes into those oil reservoirs, and the microbes go down and essentially eat up the oil, and their product is hydrogen. And because of that, like the reason why the oil can't get out is because of pressure. And so when you turn it into hydrogen, all of a sudden you've got a gas, which obviously flows. And so these fields become hydrogen producing assets, essentially. So that is gold hydrogen in a nutshell as a technology. And so, yeah.
So I want to clarify something too, because there's this whole color scheme. I can't wait till we actually start classifying hydrogen based off of its carbon intensity, because technically white hydrogen is naturally occurring hydrogen, and there are drilling productions who are out there trying to hit these hydrogen pockets. Like Australia is a huge one to take note of. But they're also calling it gold hydrogen. So there's a little bit of a disconnect in naming. But what my true belief is if you guys capitalize the gold hydrogen to be derived from microorganisms, like that is a good differentiation just to mention, because there are other places out there who are calling gold hydrogen something different. So we just want to clarify that in this sense, gold hydrogen is derived off of microbiology, right?
Yeah. Yes, okay. Gold hydrogen is derived off of microbiology, so it's hydrogen produced in the subsurface, using biology as we define it. Now, of course, it seems like there's a new color that crops up every month. We may have exacerbated that problem, but yeah, in general, like I'm with you. Like, as much as I love the marketing around gold hydrogen, it really just comes down to carbon intensity, and that's what's going to be the true measure of success in hydrogen, and how you really stack them up.
Okay, so Charlie, explain how you guys are actually utilizing, like you started to touch on how you're utilizing existing infrastructure to send down these microbiomes into wells, but give me like the bigger process. Where are you guys at and actually implementing this? Is it become a commercialized, like, is it actually producing commercialized hydrogen yet? Where are we at in the phases of production?
Yeah, so we developed this in the lab and kind of got to our production numbers that we needed in terms of yield, et cetera. And then we took that out, did it in a downhole test already. So we already completed that last summer. So right now we're just kind of on the cusp. It's like we've already got our first commercial production unit. We needed to manufacture this piece of equipment specific to our needs to be able to do this continuously and commercially. So we've got the first one of those manufactured. We're planning on doing a couple more. So, I would say that, by basically my target is by, the end of next year, we want to have 3 fields being, commercially demonstrated. And really, it's pretty quick for us to get into commercial production after that. So we're right on the cusp of actually commercially producing this stuff. And so, I mean, it's execution phase at this point in time. Our mantra is let's generate as much hydrogen as quickly as possible. So that's where we're at as a company.
What have you guys got the cost of hydrogen down to?
I can't say specifically, but it is in the our target is sub $1 a kilogram. So
Stop. Oh my gosh. Isn't blue hydrogen right now sitting at like 6 to 9?
green is, I believe, I mean, every hydrogen cost is a little different because it's mainly variable OpEx. So green is just how cheap can you get power. Blue is tied to the price of natural gas and obviously the carbon sequestration that has to be bolted onto it. But yeah, I mean, the idea here is that we believe that we are going to become the marginal cost producer of hydrogen.
I don't disbelieve you either, because the use of pre-existing assets that are already in place and what you guys are saving on not having to build more infrastructure is huge. That in my mind is circular economy at its finest.
Yep.
It's such a brilliant idea. Okay. So this sounds very sci-fi for people. When I was sitting there explaining this to my father-in-law, he's like, oh goodness, this sounds like what happens if it ran off and just, these biotechnologies took over and you couldn't control it. And I was like, okay, that's a very good question. How are you guys actually controlling to make sure that those microorganisms are staying down hole and only eating the oil in that hole? Where's the containment factor?
Yeah. So, the control of the entire biome down there it's actually an already established thing. So, it's important to note that oil reservoirs are not just full of oil and nothing else. Currently oil reservoirs today actually have fairly active biological communities in them. And, that's a lot of the reason why some wells have H2S, for example. There's sulfate reducing bacteria. And so when you look at how to control this, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, one, when we put our package down hole, it's not just microbes that we have to put down there. We have to feed them. So there's nutrients that come along with that. If you don't feed them those nutrients, they die. So that's a pretty simple one right there. And then secondly, there's loads of different companies that have biocide packages that are commonly used in, for instance, soured wells. And so biociding, if you really have to, once again, that's an established piece of the oil and gas industry right now, is controlling biology downhole.
So you're essentially feeding that well yogurt, is what I'm hearing.
Hopefully a little less viscous, but yes. Yeah.
just making sure it's getting its probiotics, its lactobacillus. Okay.
We call it a multivitamin, but yeah,
Okay, a well multivitamin. I like it. There's a term we use in power generation, and it just makes me laugh every time. It's called zombie peaker. It's when you take a coal-fired facility and you run a gas line into it and you just run the heck out of it until it dies. And it's going to be a zombie. And that's why I'm kind of like, ooh, these are like zombie wells. They're going to come back to life with all of this amazing biotechnology.
Well, that's the intent here. No.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so we talked about how we prevent it from running away. What about seeps occurring? When it comes down to hydrogen obviously has a really big impact on emissions as well. How are you guys actually making sure that it's contained in that space?
Well, I mean, that just comes down to operational philosophy for us. I mean, it's not just about getting it out of the ground, but it's also about making sure that it's, safely and effectively transported to its final destination. It comes down to just a very strong integrity management testing program, across any of the surface level assets we have to do, strong monitoring, just use of, best available technologies to make sure that we monitor, it's about getting the right seals and gaskets and all that stuff in place. So yeah, I mean, in terms of what we're looking at there, it's just making sure that you have the right operational philosophy, both from a safety and environmental stewardship standpoint.
I'm glad to know that you're thinking about all of those things post, because it is very important to keep designing with safety in mind in the hydrogen space.
Yeah,
because of how volatile of a gas it is. So I'm thankful to hear that you guys are looking at that as well. Now,
works all the time.
explain who is your customer base? Like once you guys get the current commercialization well test in place, what are the next phases for you guys? How can we support getting you to the right customers?
Yeah, I think it's the way to think about our company is that we are essentially a hydrogen E&P company. So like essentially we are our own customer. Now, different, there's different circumstances. So in some circumstances we'll license to an existing operator, but we trend towards owner operating models. So I would say that the best way to describe it is we are our own customer.
So you guys own assets right now as far as wells and stuff go in order to produce the hydrogen off of them?
We're in process. I can't speak too deeply on that, but we're in process.
Okay, sorry, curiosity. I know it's my
It's all good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to figure out next best steps for you. What does Cemvita need right now? What does this gold hydrogen spinoff of Cemvita need other than funding?
Well, I mean, right now, and honestly, it's so as far as what we're doing, again, it's just execution for us. We're already very confident in the technology itself. And so now it's really just about aligning with the right parties, the right partners, we've got a really solid team already on board to execute, but we intend on growing that team. So if anyone's listening and is interested, just hit me up. But yeah, I mean, in general, it's just about making sure that we execute properly and execute safely, effectively, cost effectively. And so that's pretty much our roadmap. Like we feel really confident in the next, in the next 12 to 18 months and what we're doing and how that translates into our 3 and 5 year plan. So yeah, I mean, it's like, there's all of the known unknowns. And then it's just making sure that we got the right problem solvers and the right people to, handle the unknown unknowns as they come up.
Charlie, I am so excited to see the growth, to be a part of this vision. Thank you so much for coming on Elemental Energy and sharing this insight and this future of hydrogen. For everybody listening, as always, stay safe. Most importantly, stay happy. Make sure that you go into the day and make somebody else smile because that's what truly life is about. Charlie, anything else you want to sign off and tell our friends that?
No, I think this has been great. And I really appreciate you having me on. And, look forward if anyone's interested, I'm always available. So hit me up and we can have a chat about some gold hydrogen. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Yes, excellent. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you're notified every time a podcast is released. Find Elemental Energy on Facebook and connect with me, Marsha Leonard, on LinkedIn. But lastly, and most importantly, share this podcast with your family and your friends, especially if you are in the energy industry and you're having an influence on the path of decarbonization. I'm on this journey figuring things out, and I want you guys to come along. So the closer I can get to you and the more I can connect with you, the better this show will be and become.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that. Hope my climate change answer wasn't too weird, but that's just kind of how I feel.
No. So what you're talking about, if you want a word to the earth going in cycles, it's called periodicity.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Periodicity. And I believe that I believe the earth does go in cycles. But do you remember when there was a huge hole in the ozone because people were using, I can't remember, phenol something and hairspray and refrigerants? Do you remember this? Yeah. Over London there was, and there was another one that was, and then it healed itself.
Because we removed it from our use. We pulled it out of refrigerants, we pulled it out of Aquanet hairspray, which I could use, obviously. But that is what really kind of enlightened me on that we're never going to make more carbon. There's only so much carbon in the earth. We're not producing more, but where it is placed really does have an effect on the atmosphere. And so that's why all of us coming together with a goal of decarbonization, it it is speeding up our earth heating like carbon emissions are. After everything that I've done on research and stuff, because I didn't believe in climate change at all. I was like a periodicity fanatic. I was like, oh no, we're just going in cycles. And then I was like, Al Gore, yeah, right, whatever. And then the more like I started researching it, I was like, oh, the guy's onto something. Like he really had a good grasp on it before a lot of other people did. So that's my stance on it, which is it's hard to explain to my oil and gas family.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the exact same stance. I mean, both of those things happen in concert, right? The Earth periodicity is a real thing. But also, if you put a closed system and pump a bunch of CO2 in it and have light shining on it, you are going to heat up that system more than otherwise. You know, the periodicity is still occurring. It's just an acceleration of the cycle. And so it's like, you know, the more people start to think about this Earth as a giant like science experiment, essentially, and we, you know, everything impacts it. You know, you increase the concentration of gas in any closed system, and it's going to have an impact on things. Like, you know, so that's what I was trying to get across there. It's like, but I mean, my firm belief is also that like we need to be able to terraform our own planet. You know what I mean? Like, because that like we should be able to cool down our planet if we need to. And then like it's like it's shocking to me that there's not more attention paid to technologies like that, especially when we're talking about going to Mars. And you're like, well, all those technologies, you can change the, you know, the entire ecosystem. That's also very valuable and translatable to entire other planets as well. Because like, you know, you look at the 500-year future of humanity, and we're going to have to do that.